Welcome to You Brew Kombucha. Today we're going to talk about whether or not you can use different types of tea with the same SCOBY. This is a pretty common question I get from homebrewers a lot, and it's whether or not you can use the same SCOBY to brew kombucha using different types of tea. And the short answer to that is yes, as long as you're using pure tea. I cover this in my other videos about what tea is and what pure tea really means, but in a nutshell, there are a lot of herbal teas or tisanes that are not really tea. True tea comes from one plant, and it's the Camellia sinensis plant, and from that one plant comes a multitude of different tea types. So white tea, green tea, oolong tea, black tea, pu'er tea, all of those are pure teas as long as there aren't any flavorings or other herbs or flowers added to them. In a nutshell, if you have one SCOBY that you've been using to brew a batch of kombucha using, say, black tea, and you want to try out another batch using green tea, you can go ahead and just use green tea in the next batch without worrying that the SCOBY is going to freak out. For the most part, because kombucha SCOBYs are adapted to feed on the ingredients in real tea, it shouldn't matter that you're switching from black tea to green tea because it's the same leaf. It's the same ingredient. The only difference between black tea and green tea is the level of oxidation and the processing method. So the kombucha culture shouldn't have a problem with switching from one tea type to another as long as you're using real tea. I will say that if you want to be super, super careful and super conservative and make sure that your kombucha doesn't freak out or doesn't experience any harmful ill effects from transitioning to the tea, if you want to slowly acclimate your SCOBY to the new tea type that you're using, then you can take a more gradual approach. Say that you've been brewing kombucha using black tea and you want to start using white tea instead to brew your kombucha. You can either just make the transition, just go ahead and use the same SCOBY, same starter tea, and just use 100% white tea for your next batch of kombucha. Or if you want to do it a little bit more gradually so that your SCOBY doesn't get shell-shocked as a result of the change, if you have a particularly sensitive SCOBY that's prone to mold, then go ahead and transition it a little bit slowly. And the way you do that is by using half the amount of black tea or whatever your original tea was, and using half the new tea or the white tea, whatever the tea is that you're looking to use in your batches moving forward. Go ahead and ferment that batch as you usually would, bottle it when it's done, and then for the next batch that you're brewing, lessen the amount of the old tea that you're using. So use maybe 3 parts of the new tea that you want and 1 part of the black tea or the old tea that you were using that you want to transition away from. And go ahead and ferment that batch as you usually would, bottle it, drink it, and then when you're brewing that next batch, then you can go ahead and just use 100% whatever that new tea is that you want to use for your batches moving forward. And that way it's a little bit more of a gradual adjustment period for your SCOBY. I would say in most cases, as long as the tea is unflavored, like I said, you won't need to go through that level of rigor in order to start using a different tea for your brew. But I will note that there are some people, some homebrewers that I've spoken to that say that their SCOBY freaks out whenever they try to use a different tea, and either the batch won't ferment properly, it'll get moldy, or the flavors will just be off for a few batches until the SCOBY gets used to the new tea and the new ingredients that you're putting into it. And so having that gradual transition period can help be a little bit of a precaution against that. No guarantees. Everybody's SCOBYs are different, and obviously there are so many different types of tea out there that's processed differently from different companies and from different countries that this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are also a lot of home brewers that like to keep different SCOBYs for different types of teas. So some people will have a SCOBY hotel and kombucha batches just using black tea, and some people will use a different SCOBY for their white tea batches, and so on and so forth for all the different types of tea that they use. And that's a perfectly fine way to help keep your SCOBYs distinct from each other if that's how you prefer to brew. I will take this opportunity to plug my book, the Kombucha Crafter's Logbook, which is now available on Amazon if you haven't picked it up already. And one of the reasons why I'm plugging it for this video specifically is at the end, there is a section where you can keep track of different SCOBY hotels. So if you do have different SCOBY hotels for designated types of tea, you can use that section to help keep track of all of your different SCOBY hotels, the different ingredients and different types of tea that you use for each one. And so that might be helpful for you if that's something you're interested in checking out. I'll put a link to the book down in the description box below. So if you have any other tips or recommendations about using different tea types in your kombucha brewing process, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I would love to hear from you about your experiences here as well. And if you have any questions or want to explore other topics about the kombucha brewing process, you can always find more resources at youbrewkombucha.com. Happy brewing!